Hello and welcome to this Dragon Marine Systems. This is part 2 of a series of videos where we replace a standard Volvo Penta instrument panel, as you can see now defunct, for one on a sailing motor yacht. As we said in part 1, the owner wanted to upgrade the functionality of their instrument panel from this basic one that just has a tachometer and warning lights to a Dragon panel that had much more functionality with tachometer, with voltmeter, water temperature gauge, oil pressure gauge, and again the associated warning lights. So this is the one that we opted for, we designed for him. It has the multi-gauge, it has all the functionality of 4 gauges with tachometer, with oil pressure, water temperature, voltage. We also have the warning lights for oil temperature, for oil pressure, temperature, charging, and we have a breaker on this system also. The reason that we went for a multi-gauge was that the owner was strictly limited for space. This is the space that he has on his westerly motor yacht, and the space has been created by the manufacturer when the boat was made. So it's in the ideal position for him to see while he's at the helm, but this is literally all the space that he has. When we came to fit the gauge for the customer, this was what we were presented with. This is how he had been running his boat to get it back to his home berth. So obviously all of this had to come out and be discarded. Then we replaced the new panel. Now, the customer wanted to keep the old wiring harness and the harness on the boat's engine. The method of fitting that we are going to use in this instance is to break into the Volvo Penta wiring harness that was originally fitted. This has 16 wires within it. We only require 11 wires. The Dragon panel comes with a standard 11-way plug. The Volvo harness had the standard Volvo round 16-way plug, which we had to remove. Once we had removed the original Volvo Penta round plug and the head of the system that fed into the original panel, we were able to continuity test all of the 16 wires in the Volvo Penta loom. Do not skip on this process. Continuity test the loom before you start to use it. So here it is, the head of the wiring loom that was originally in there, and what we found when we came to fit the new panel. The round 16-way plug can be seen, and we need to get rid of this. The boat owner looked quite concerned as we clipped off this part of the loom, but really it is no longer required, and away we go fitting the new parts. So we've removed all of the wires, we have done our continuity testing, and the loom was in good enough condition that we could continue to use it. So the way forward is to take one wire at a time, attach one wire at a time, and test one wire at a time. We had the original wiring diagram from the owner, which was very useful as it gave us the pin numbers for the instrument panel and the pin numbers for the engine. These are the 11-way multiplug and spades that we're going to use to connect onto the Volvo Penta wiring loom. So, as I said earlier, the first thing that we do is to take things one wire at a time. In this case, 2 wires at a time, the positive and negative wires to feed the panel with electricity. This is a 12 volt panel. We would do exactly the same if it was a 24 volt panel. We take the positive and negative, and then what we're going to do is put this into the correct socket in the 11 way. So those are placed into the 11 way according to the Dragon Marine Systems wiring diagram that came with the Dragon Marine Systems panel. This will be a different configuration to the Volvo panel, so we cut the old 16 way off. Having connected these two, we can then plug in the panel, and the panel bursts to life. Not very much life at the moment. What we're doing is showing that the voltage is just over 14 volts. The boat owner was very happy with this because he was charging his batteries while I was doing this work. I was working on a live system. I do not recommend that you work on a live system. I recommend that you disconnect the battery and reconnect it for each testing phase. So, time to move on. Our next move is to use the wiring diagram that has been supplied by the owner, showing the original wiring for the Volvo Penta engine and the new wiring diagram supplied by Dragon Marine Systems, to marry up the original functions that were on the panel. Once more, taking one wire at a time and connecting one wire at a time and testing one wire at a time. You may be able to see from this photograph that the panel is still active. Now the next wire, check the colour, look at the old wiring diagram, look at the new wiring diagram and connect the two together. As you can see, the Dragon Marine Systems female part of the multiplug and the male part of the multiplug are joined together. This is so I can marry up the wires between the two. Then each wire is checked, check the colour, check the wiring diagram, check the Dragon Marine wiring diagram, put on the spade connector and insert it into the block connector and test to see whether that function is going. This process will take you all day. You should expect the process in total to go from bare wiring to fully connected to take you at least 2 days. Preferably you want to be doing this in the dry. So now we are connected. The big black hole that you see next to the panel is the way down to the engine room. I will be up and down that ladder many times over the next hours and days as they follow, as we do the connections at the engine side and once more test each of these connections as we go. We are actually quite lucky that there's lots of space on this particular motor sailor, so we can access the engine through this hatch and through 2 hatches in a companion way and the rear saloon, so there's plenty of access around the engine. You will need good access, the best access that you can build for yourself. So here is our engine in situ. Here is the original Volvo wiring harness, and what we are going to do is take wires from that for the additional wires that are required for the new functionality of the Dragon Marine Systems instrument panel. We do also offer a Volvo Penta wiring loom replacement or replenishment process, where you send the old loom off to us and we will completely renew it for you. The engine harness plug is located here, the engine harness fuse, the temperature sensor and the pressure sensor. We will need to access all of these as we are working on this engine. So before you start work, the thing to do is to identify the parts of your engine that you are going to need to access. On both the old panel and the new panel, the tachometer was driven from the alternator, so we did not have to change any wiring on this engine for the tacho drive. We will, however, need to change the temperature sensors. So you can see the old temperature sensor, which was just a switch for the warning light, and the new temperature sensor, which is longer. So please measure the depth of the hole that you have before you screw in the new temperature sensor, as you may cause damage to your engine. The new temperature sensor is longer. The oil pressure sensor, however, is no longer. It's the same thread, though it is, as you can see, wider, because once more the old one was just a warning light sensor. This sensor, the new one, performs two functions and gives you an oil pressure reading and a warning light function. Warning light function will be when it's less than a couple of bar. The sensors are marked so that you can wire them up with G and W for gauge and warning, and you will find the same on the temperature sensor, though it's much less easy to see on the temperature sensor. So we will have to connect on to a new set of sensors, and this may require a new set of fittings. This is the old Volvo Penta sensor with two push-on bullet fittings, and as you could see, the temperature was spade fittings and the oil pressure was ring fittings, so we would need to change the wiring to accommodate the new temperature and oil pressure sensors. As you can also see, it was very cold, so I needed my finger gloves on. You do need to be able to protect your hands if you can, but you also need manual dexterity, so please be safe when you're working. We had an issue when we fired the whole thing up with the tachometer. The tachometer wasn't working. Volvo Penta told us that the tachometer wire was a grey wire, a solid grey wire. That was what was on the wiring diagram. When we fired it up, it didn't work, and trial and error told us that what we were looking for was a grey and white wire in the loom. This was located, and it was using the internet. Basically, we looked for a newer Volvo Penta wiring diagram that gave us the information that it was going to be a grey-white wire. So what we did was break into the Volvo Penta wiring loom to access two new wires. These new wires were for the oil pressure gauge and the water temperature gauge. Now, funnily enough, we go from quite a basic panel to a far more deluxe panel, And the only thing that we're going to have to do is to change these two wires. These were clipped onto a small connector, and this connector was used to provide the two new wires that we ran through to the gauge part of the water temperature sensor and the gauge part of the oil pressure sensor. In reality, it only took about 30 centimeters of wire for each one. It was all quite close together, and the job was quite neatly accomplished. Though, as I say, we can do this job for you. If you send the whole thing off, then we will add the new wiring into the original Volvo wiring. This is the type of extension lead that we used for the sensor wiring for the warning lights. The owner didn't want the old fittings cut off, just in case he wanted to retrofit the old type of panel again. So what we did was make up some extension leads, and then the new panel was fitted in position, and off we went doing our testing. Obviously what we need now is water running to the engine, where you cannot see from these photos, but we're on hard standing during the boat's winter layup period. So we went to test and run the engine up to show the whole thing working, and that's really as far as we go on this particular part of the series. So we have it all set up and running. We've done our wiring, we've done a bit of snagging. Thank you for watching this Dragon Marine video.